Since humans first learned how to tell stories, we've also learned how to grieve what was lost. Long before science had a name, people were already mourning vanished animals, silent forests, and creatures that once shared the world with us, but now exist only as bones, cave paintings, or fragmented myths. Extinction has always felt final, a closed door in the history of life. But for the first time, that certainty is starting to crack. Today, science is asking a question that once belonged only to science fiction. What if extinction doesn't have to be permanent? What if the past isn't just something we remember, but something we can rebuild? The idea of bringing extinct species back to life, known as de-extinction, has been around for decades in movies, books, and speculative theories. For a long time, it was pure fantasy, a thought experiment, something exciting but unrealistic. That changed quietly, almost without anyone noticing. Advances in genetic engineering, cloning, and genome editing turned imagination into something dangerously close to reality. De-extinction is no longer about dreams. It's about labs, DNA sequencers, frozen tissues, and ethical debates that grow more complex every year. Before we dive in, tell us where you're watching from and subscribe if you're enjoying Primal Roots. At its core, de-extinction sits at the crossroads of paleontology, biotechnology, genetics, and ecology. The process usually starts with ancient DNA, fragile genetic fragments preserved in fossils, bones, skin samples, museum specimens, or even frozen remains locked in permafrost. This DNA is incomplete, damaged, and full of gaps. Scientists then compare it to the genome of living relatives, carefully reconstructing what's missing, gene by gene, sequence by sequence. Once enough of the genome is rebuilt, researchers attempt to create an embryo. That embryo is then implanted into a closely related living species, which acts as a surrogate. If everything works, and that's a huge if, the result is an animal that hasn't walked the earth for thousands of years. But bringing back an extinct species isn't like pressing a reset button. Ancient DNA breaks down over time. Some genes are lost forever. Living species aren't always compatible hosts. And even if an animal is born successfully, survival is far from guaranteed. A resurrected creature doesn't just need a body, it needs an environment, social structure, learned behaviors, and an ecosystem that can support it. De-extinction isn't just a biological challenge. It's ecological, behavioral, and deeply social. Among the most studied candidates is the woolly mammoth, the undisputed icon of de-extinction. Closely related to modern elephants, mammoths once dominated the frozen grasslands of Eurasia and North America. They disappeared around 4,000 years ago, leaving behind frozen carcasses preserved in Siberian ice. These remains contain some of the best preserved ancient DNA ever found. Scientists working on projects like Colossal Biosciences in the United States are attempting to insert mammoth genes into Asian elephant embryos. The goal isn't to create an exact copy of the original mammoth, but a hybrid, an animal adapted to cold climates, thick fur, layers of fat, and unique blood chemistry. The vision goes beyond curiosity. Supporters argue that reintroducing mammoth-like animals could help restore Arctic ecosystems, compact snow, spread grasslands, slow permafrost melting, and even reduce carbon release. In this view, de-extinction becomes a tool to fight climate change, not just a scientific experiment. Another powerful symbol is the thylacine, often called the Tasmanian tiger. This carnivorous marsupial looked like a wolf with stripes and once ruled parts of Australia and Tasmania. It was hunted relentlessly by settlers and farmers, blamed for livestock losses, and officially declared extinct in the 1930s. Unlike ancient Ice Age animals, the thylacine vanished recently. Its DNA is relatively well preserved in museum collections. Researchers have already sequenced large portions of its genome and are exploring ways to recreate it using living marsupials as biological references. For many people, the thylacine isn't just an extinct animal, it's a symbol of guilt, a reminder of how quickly human fear and ignorance can erase an entire species. Bringing it back feels, to some, like a form of historical repair. Then there's the dodo. Native to the island of Mauritius, the dodo was a flightless bird that evolved without natural predators. When humans arrived, the bird stood no chance. Within less than a century, hunting and invasive species wiped it out completely. The dodo became a global symbol of extinction itself, a cautionary tale taught in classrooms around the world. Today, scientists are comparing dodo DNA extracted from preserved bones with modern pigeons, its closest living relatives. The idea is to gradually reconstruct a functional genome and eventually produce a viable embryo. The technical challenges are enormous, especially when it comes to finding a suitable surrogate species. Still, the effort continues, not because it's easy, but because of what it represents. These projects aren't only about science, they're about memory. De-extinction forces us to confront uncomfortable questions. Why did these species disappear? What role did humans play? And now that we have the tools, what responsibility comes with that power? The list of extinct animals under study keeps growing. Passenger pigeons, once numbering in the billions across North America, vanished due to industrial-scale hunting. Aurochs, the wild ancestors of modern cattle, shaped European landscapes for thousands of years before disappearing in the 17th century. Dire wolves, massive Ice Age predators, continue to fascinate researchers studying their genetics and behavior. Each species represents more than biological data. Each one was part of a living system, shaping forests, grasslands, food chains, and even human culture. De-extinction, at its best, isn't about nostalgia. It's about understanding how ecosystems worked before we disrupted them. It's about learning what balance looked like and whether fragments of that balance can be restored. But from the very beginning, one truth is clear. Bringing something back from extinction is never neutral. It changes the present as much as it rewrites the past. And as science pushes forward, one question grows louder with every breakthrough. Not whether we can do it, but whether we truly understand what comes next. As the science of de-extinction advances, the focus shifts from possibility to practicality. It's no longer enough to ask whether extinct species can be recreated in a laboratory. The real challenge lies in understanding what happens after that moment, after birth, after the headlines, after the novelty fades. Because life does not exist in isolation. Every species is a thread in a larger ecological fabric, and pulling one back into existence can reshape the entire weave. Researchers studying de-extinction quickly realize that genetics alone is only the beginning. Recreating an organism's DNA does not recreate the world it once lived in. Climate has changed. Landscapes have been fragmented. Entire ecosystems have evolved in the absence of the species that once shaped them. Any attempt to bring extinct animals back must confront this reality. This is why modern de-extinction projects increasingly frame themselves as ecological restoration efforts rather than resurrection experiments. The goal is not simply to revive lost creatures, but to understand how their absence altered natural systems, and whether their return could help stabilize environments that are currently under stress. Consider the case of the woolly mammoth once again. During the Ice Age, mammoths were not just large herbivores roaming frozen plains. They were ecosystem engineers. Their massive bodies compacted snow, allowing colder air to penetrate the soil and keep permafrost frozen. Their grazing prevented forests from overtaking grasslands, maintaining open-steppe ecosystems that reflected sunlight and regulated temperature. When mammoths vanished, those systems collapsed. Snow accumulated, insulation increased, and permafrost began to thaw. Modern researchers believe that reintroducing mammoth-like animals could help reverse some of those processes. This idea, often referred to as Pleistocene rewilding, proposes that restoring lost megafauna may slow climate feedback loops in the Arctic. It is an ambitious hypothesis, supported by field experiments in places like Siberia's Pleistocene Park, where large herbivores are already being used to simulate ancient grazing patterns. Yet even here, uncertainty dominates. No recreated mammoth would be genetically identical to its ancestors. Behavioral differences, environmental pressures, and human interaction would shape a fundamentally new organism. The animal might resemble the past, but it would live entirely in the present. This same tension applies to other candidates for de-extinction. The passenger pigeon, once the most abundant bird in North America, played a critical role in forest dynamics. Its massive flocks broke tree branches, redistributed nutrients through droppings, and altered plant competition on a continental scale. When the species disappeared, forests quietly changed. Some trees flourished, others declined. Ecological rhythms that had existed for thousands of years were disrupted in a matter of decades. Scientists attempting to recreate passenger pigeons are not simply chasing numbers. Their interest lies in whether the behaviors that defined the species, synchronized movement, large flock dynamics, mass nesting, can emerge again from recreated genomes. Without those behaviors, the ecological role of the species cannot be restored. Behavior, in fact, is one of the most underestimated challenges in de-extinction science. Animals do not inherit knowledge the same way they inherit genes. Migration routes, hunting strategies, social hierarchies, and communication patterns are learned over generations. An animal born in a controlled environment lacks that inherited experience. A predator may not know how to hunt. A social species may not know how to interact. A migratory animal may not know where to go. This raises a critical question. Even if a species is genetically revived, is it truly the same species without its cultural memory? Marsupials like the thylacine highlight this dilemma. As a mid-level predator, the thylacine once regulated prey populations and shaped Tasmania's ecological balance. Any attempt to reintroduce it would require not only genetic reconstruction, but careful behavioral conditioning. Researchers would need to simulate learning environments, controlled hunting practice, and gradual exposure to natural ecosystems. Without this, a recreated thylacine could struggle to survive, or worse, disrupt fragile prey populations. The issue becomes even more complex with species that vanished thousands of years ago. The moa of New Zealand, a giant flightless bird that could reach heights over 3 meters, had no mammalian predators until humans arrived. Its extinction reshaped the entire landscape, affecting plant growth, seed dispersal, and predator dynamics. Reintroducing a moa-like animal today would require rethinking land use, predator control, and habitat protection on a national scale. De-extinction, then, is not a single scientific decision. It is a cascade of choices that affect conservation policy, land management, and even human communities. This leads directly to the ethical dimension, a layer that cannot be separated from the science. Every de-extinction project raises questions about responsibility. If humans caused an extinction, do we have a moral obligation to reverse it? Or does attempting to do so create new forms of harm? These questions do not have simple answers, and scientists themselves are deeply divided. One concern is animal welfare. A recreated species may face chronic stress, isolation, or health issues due to genetic imperfections or environmental mismatch. Ancient DNA is often incomplete, meaning reconstructed genomes may include unintended mutations. Even subtle genetic errors can affect immune systems, reproduction, or lifespan. Another concern involves conservation priorities. Resources invested in de-extinction could otherwise be used to protect endangered species that still exist. Critics argue that saving living ecosystems should take precedence over recreating lost ones. Supporters counter that the technologies developed for de-extinction, advanced genetic sequencing, reproductive techniques, habitat modeling, directly benefit conservation efforts as well. There is also a psychological risk. If extinction appears reversible, society may become less motivated to prevent it. The idea that science can fix biodiversity loss could weaken the urgency of conservation. This is sometimes referred to as the moral hazard of de-extinction, the danger that technological optimism replaces responsibility. Political and economic factors further complicate the picture. Decisions about which species to revive are rarely neutral. Charismatic animals attract funding, media attention, and public support. Less visually striking species, insects, plants, microorganisms, are often overlooked, despite their essential ecological roles. De-extinction risks becoming a spectacle driven by fascination rather than ecological necessity. Control is another unresolved issue. Who decides where recreated species live? Who owns them? Who is accountable if things go wrong? A resurrected animal crossing borders, damaging crops, or affecting local wildlife could quickly become a geopolitical issue. Without international frameworks, de-extinction operates in a legal gray zone. Despite these challenges, research continues, not recklessly, but cautiously. Many scientists emphasize that the greatest value of de-extinction may not lie in the animals themselves, but in what the process reveals. By reconstructing ancient genomes, researchers gain insight into evolution, adaptation, disease resistance, and climate resilience. Studying how Ice Age animals survived extreme cold, for example, could inform medical research, agriculture, and climate science. In this sense, de-extinction acts as a bridge between deep time and the modern world. It connects extinct ecosystems to living ones, past crises to present challenges. It forces humanity to confront its influence on the planet not as a distant abstraction, but as an active force shaping life's trajectory. As technology pushes forward, one pattern becomes increasingly clear. The question is no longer whether humans can bring back pieces of the past. The real question is whether we are prepared to care for what returns and to accept the consequences of altering the present in the process. Because restoring a species does not restore innocence, it restores responsibility. And as the line between what was lost and what can be rebuilt continues to blur, de-extinction becomes something more than science. It becomes a test of restraint, foresight, and the willingness to learn from history rather than simply rewrite it. The future of de-extinction will not be decided by DNA alone. It will be decided by how carefully humanity chooses to reconnect with the living systems it once disrupted, and whether knowledge is used to repair balance rather than repeat the same mistakes under a different name. When you're ready, I can continue with Chapter 03, bringing the narrative toward its ethical, philosophical, and future-focused conclusion. As de-extinction moves from theory to application, it becomes impossible to treat it as a purely scientific pursuit. The tools that allow genomes to be reconstructed and species to be reintroduced also force a deeper confrontation with power, the power to alter evolutionary outcomes, to reshape ecosystems, and to redefine humanity's role within the natural world. This power does not arrive quietly. It demands decisions that extend far beyond laboratories. At its core, de-extinction challenges one of the oldest assumptions in biology, that extinction is irreversible. For millions of years, extinction marked a permanent endpoint. Species vanished, niches emptied, and evolution moved forward without looking back. Now, for the first time, a single species, Homo sapiens, possesses the ability to interrupt that process. This marks a profound shift in the history of life on Earth. With that shift comes responsibility on an unprecedented scale. Every attempt to revive an extinct species raises a fundamental question. What does it mean to bring life back into a world that no longer resembles the one it left? Modern ecosystems are shaped by human activity, fragmented by infrastructure, altered by climate change, and constrained by political boundaries. Any species reintroduced today must survive not in a wild, untouched landscape, but in a human-dominated planet. This reality forces de-extinction research to align itself closely with conservation science. Increasingly, scientists emphasize that resurrecting extinct species without protecting existing ones would be ethically hollow. There is little value in recreating Ice Age megafauna, while modern elephants, rhinos, and large carnivores continue to disappear. De-extinction only holds meaning if it strengthens, rather than distracts from, efforts to preserve living biodiversity. This is why many researchers argue that the true legacy of de-extinction will not be measured by how many species return, but by how deeply it transforms conservation strategies. Technologies developed to edit genomes, preserve genetic diversity, and improve reproductive success are already being applied to endangered species. In some cases, genes from extinct populations are being reintroduced into living ones to restore lost resilience, disease resistance, or environmental adaptability. In this way, extinction is no longer viewed as a single event, but as a process, one that can sometimes be slowed, partially reversed, or redirected. Yet even this approach carries risks. Genetic intervention alters evolutionary trajectories that would otherwise unfold naturally. Selecting which traits to restore and which to discard introduces human preference into processes once governed by environmental pressure alone. Over time, this could lead to ecosystems shaped not by survival, but by design. This possibility raises concerns about control. Who defines what a restored species should look like? Should it match its ancient ancestor as closely as possible, or should it be modified to better survive modern conditions? A mammoth adapted to warmer temperatures, a bird engineered to resist invasive predators, or a predator designed to avoid conflict with humans, may function ecologically, but they would no longer be purely products of natural evolution. The boundary between restoration and creation becomes increasingly difficult to define. Ethical debates surrounding de-extinction often focus on animal welfare, but they extend further into questions of justice and inequality. Advanced genetic technologies are expensive and concentrated in a small number of countries and institutions. Decisions about which species deserve revival may reflect cultural values, economic interests, or national identity rather than ecological need. Charismatic animals tend to dominate public attention, while less visible species remain overlooked. A revived mammoth captures imagination, funding, and media coverage. Reviving an extinct beetle or plant rarely does, despite its potential importance to ecosystem stability. This imbalance risks reinforcing a hierarchy of life driven by spectacle rather than function. There is also the issue of long-term commitment. Bringing a species back is not a single act. It is the beginning of an obligation that may last centuries. Reintroduced animals require habitat protection, genetic management, disease monitoring, and conflict mitigation. Abandoning these responsibilities could lead to suffering, ecological disruption, or repeated extinction. this time under human supervision. From a philosophical perspective, de-extinction forces humanity to confront its self-image. For centuries, humans viewed themselves as separate from nature, observers, exploiters, or stewards. De-extinction collapses that distance. It places humans inside the evolutionary process, not as passive participants, but as active agents capable of reversing outcomes. This shift has consequences for how responsibility is understood. If extinction can be undone, then loss becomes a choice rather than an inevitability. But so does restraint. The ability to act does not eliminate the obligation to decide when not to. Some scientists argue that the most important contribution of de-extinction lies in its ability to reshape how society perceives extinction itself. When extinction is seen as irreversible, it often feels abstract, tragic, but distant. When it becomes technically negotiable, it demands closer attention. It exposes the causes, timelines, and human decisions behind each loss. In this sense, de-extinction functions as a mirror. It reflects not only what has vanished, but how easily it vanished, and how preventable many extinctions truly were. There is also a deeper temporal dimension to consider. De-extinction connects deep evolutionary time with the present moment. It forces modern societies to engage with events that occurred thousands or even millions of years ago, and to accept that actions taken today will echo far into the future. A species revived now may shape ecosystems long after current civilizations fade. This long view challenges short-term thinking, which dominates political and economic systems. Conservation often struggles because its benefits unfold slowly, while its costs are immediate. De-extinction magnifies this tension. It requires planning across generations, stable institutions, and ethical frameworks capable of enduring technological change. Without such structures, the risk of misuse increases. De-extinction could be driven by tourism, prestige, or competition rather than ecological wisdom. It could become a tool for rewriting history selectively, restoring what is convenient while ignoring systemic causes of environmental destruction. Still, the science continues, cautiously, deliberately, and under growing scrutiny. Each reconstructed genome, each preserved tissue sample, and each experimental embryo contributes to a larger understanding of life's complexity. These efforts deepen knowledge of evolution, adaptation, and resilience, offering insights that extend far beyond the goal of resurrection. Perhaps the most important realization to emerge from de-extinction research is this: technology cannot replace responsibility. No amount of genetic power can compensate for the destruction of habitats, the destabilization of climates, or the erosion of ecological relationships. De-extinction does not erase the need for conservation. It amplifies it. In a world facing accelerating biodiversity loss, de-extinction serves as both a warning and an opportunity. It warns that human influence has reached a level where even the finality of extinction is no longer guaranteed. And it offers an opportunity to redefine that influence, not as domination, but as accountability. The future of de-extinction will depend less on scientific capability than on collective judgment. The question is not whether extinct species can return, but whether humanity can change fast enough to ensure that their return has meaning. Because reviving the past without protecting the present leads nowhere. If the mammoth returns while elephants vanish, nothing is gained. If the thylacine walks again while ecosystems continue to collapse, the gesture becomes empty. If lost species are resurrected only to inhabit a world still defined by unchecked exploitation, the cycle simply repeats under a different narrative. De-extinction ultimately asks for something more difficult than technological innovation. It asks for restraint, humility, and long-term thinking, qualities that evolution did not necessarily favor, but that survival now requires. The past is not gone. It persists in genes, landscapes, and unfinished ecological relationships. Whether that past becomes a guide or a warning depends on how the power to revive it is used. In the end, de-extinction is not about defying nature. It is about confronting the consequences of shaping it, and deciding, with clarity and care, what kind of future deserves to be built from the fragments of what was lost. If this journey into lost worlds changed how you see the future of life, explore more stories where science, evolution, and responsibility intersect, and stay connected to what still can be protected.